Jake, I've never seen Majority Leader Schumer, Senator Schumer. I've been covering him now for going on 20 years. I've never seen him like that. What was it like on the Hill today? What has it been like now that everybody's back and now that there's a new candidate on the Democratic side?
Well, I think to me, Katie, in a weird way, highlights just the discomfort, perhaps, with Joe Biden as the party's standard bearer. He was uneven on the campaign trail, uneven in public appearances. And we wrote this morning in the morning edition of Punchbowl News that Democratic House and Senate candidates, endangered candidates who will be fighting for their seats in November, feel like they have a new lease on life. They're raising more money than ever before. They feel like they have somebody at the top of the ticket who they can run with, not somebody who they have to run away from. And that is something that took a month, right? It's been a month almost since that disastrous debate performance by Joe Biden. And Democrats finally feel like they have a pep in their step. Now, let's remember, it's day one, right? Or day two, I guess, of members being back up here and contending with Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket. But it's definitely a different feel. Now, on the Republican side of the aisle, Katie, they've been running now for 2 years against Joe Biden on Capitol Hill. They've investigated him. They've tried to tarnish his name. They've tried to ensnare his family members. And now they're stuck running against a relatively young for political, in political terms, woman of color. And that is difficult for a lot of House Republicans, many of whom have made either outwardly racist comments or vaguely racist comments about the vice president in her campaign and about her campaign. And Speaker Mike Johnson and the leadership have urged them as much as they can to stay on policy and not criticize her as a person. Republicans don't listen, of course. They're not very good at that, and they will do what they want. But this is going to be something that we see a lot over the next couple months as Republicans have to quickly adapt to this new reality.
You know, Ashley, I've been thinking a lot about how Donald Trump ran against Hillary Clinton in 2016. You covered that alongside me. And he really ran straight ahead at her as a woman, calling her nasty, saying that she wasn't ready. She didn't have the temperament to be president. There were dog whistles, of course, but there were direct insults and direct attacks based on her gender. Is that what we should expect Donald Trump to do this time around?
So for what it's worth, Katie, I've also been thinking a lot about that, and not just about how he ran against Hillary Clinton, but how he ran against Carly Fiorina in the 2016 Republican primary before he ran against Hillary Clinton, and then this time how he ran against Nikki Haley in the Republican primary. And I think that's all instructive because when you look at that, on the one hand, from a 30,000-foot view, he was successful, right? He won in each case. But when you drill down, those sorts of insults and attacks really hurt him with some of the voters who he will need, who Vice President Harris will need this election. And it can really backfire. And then you can also take it a step further. He has not run in a major way against a black woman. But when you look at some of the things he has said about Black women and how he has treated them and spoken about them, that's another area where he has been both overtly sexist and misogynistic and also much more latent. So it's something that the Harris team is expecting, and it's something that can potentially backfire if Trump goes over the top on that. But in a nation that still has certain racist and sexist biases, it's not fair for a female candidate, but it's certainly a challenge and a dynamic she has that other male candidates don't.
Again, though, so much has changed in the past 8 years since Hillary Clinton ran. It's the post-Me Too movement. We've seen women ascend to very high offices all across this country, a lot of female governors out there. It just feels like a different moment than it did in 2016. We also had a number of women run in the Democratic primary in 2020. Nikki Haley ran pretty fiercely against Donald Trump during this primary, garnered quite a bit of the Republican vote, obviously not enough to get to the nomination, but enough to make it clear that not all of the Republican Party was on board with Donald Trump. Mark, I want to get to you in a minute, but I want to bring in Yamiche Alcindor, who's with us from West Allis, Wisconsin. She is at the rally, the site of Kamala Harris's first campaign event. What did she say today, and what does that tell us about what she's going to say for this campaign going forward?
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris spoke before a raucous crowd here in the Milwaukee area. She started off by saying the road to winning this election runs through Wisconsin, and then she went on to really pointedly attack former President Trump. She laid out what I think will be the thesis of her campaign. Take a listen to that.
I was elected Attorney General of the state of California, and I was a courtroom prosecutor before then. And in those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women, fraudsters who ripped off consumers, cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type.
So there you have it. Kamala Harris really summing up her campaign message in just a couple words there, the prosecutor and the convict. I also want to point out that you could hear people in the crowd shouting, lock him up. This was an energized crowd of 3,000 people. The Harris campaign says that this is the biggest campaign event that they've held since the Biden-Harris and now Harris campaign started. It was also important to note that the vice president talked about the fundraising here. She said in the last 24 hours, they've had the best fundraising of any presidential campaign in history. She also went on to talk about the middle class, talk about the fact that she's not just running in contrast of Donald Trump, but that she's also running because she has a vision for America. She talked about the fact that she doesn't want to go back, but she wants to instead go forward, really embracing the idea of an America that's going to be diverse and inclusive. She talked a lot about the idea that this is really going to be a campaign of the people. And she also said that this is really going to be a campaign where all of the people who support her are going to have to get to work. At one point, she said, we have doors to knock on, we have phone calls to make, we need to get to work. She was asking the crowd, are we ready? They were shouting back, yes. And I should tell you, I've been with her now over the last 2 days. This energy has really been palpable. Yesterday, she went to the campaign headquarters, and people were sweating and really packed shoulder to shoulder because they were so excited to see her in Wilmington. And that same energy carried over here in Wisconsin. I was also told by some of her aides that they're going to be making the case that she has a sort of expanded bio here. So one of her aides noted to me that she spent some time living in Wisconsin as a little girl when her mother was a cancer researcher. So while we all know her as the district attorney and attorney general of California, there is that bio pieces of her childhood that they're also going to be rolling out. So really, I think a powerful moment for the vice president as she is wanting to make the case against Donald Trump, but also, of course, really cognizant of the idea that this is really going to be a history-making campaign by her own standards, talking about the idea that women are going to be at the center of this, that voters of color are going to be at the center of this, but also that it's going to be an inclusive campaign where everyone is going to be welcome. So a lot there and a lot to go forward, Katie.
Yamiche, thank you very much. All right, Mark, let's get into some numbers here. We got some new polling out. There's a Reuters poll released just a few minutes ago that shows Kamala Harris in the lead, that she has 44% of registered voters. Donald Trump has 42% of registered voters. This is a snap poll taken in the couple days. It's just been 2 days since President Biden decided to step aside and not run for the White House. It also comes alongside a Morning Consult poll that had Donald Trump up 2 points. But what it shows here, Mark, is that there is movement.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think obviously there's going to be some sugar high element to this. I mean, this is brand new. And I think that you can't underestimate just the power of basically relief that Democrats are feeling that is probably propelling Kamala Harris, just given what the last 3-4 weeks have been like. I mean, it's been divisive. It's been exhausting. It's been difficult to watch, I guess, if you're a Democrat, and there's been a lot of gloom and doom around it. But yeah, I mean, I don't think, obviously, you don't want to put too much stock in a snap poll, especially one snap poll, especially a national poll, when obviously the state by states are what's going to be determinative here. But look, I mean, I think it's probably likely that the numbers are probably going to move in a good direction for Democrats, which, if nothing else, will sort of help momentum. But it's also a long haul, and we're just getting started. And this is, as Jake said, day 2. And the Republican Party, I mean, the Trump campaign obviously has a plan for Kamala Harris, which we haven't really seen to this point. But it's going to be a lot more difficult going forward than just these initial few days. The
Trump campaign also says, Donald Trump himself says, that he will debate her. There was that post he put out on his social media saying that he would debate her, but he thinks it should be on Fox News because ABC is unfair. On an RNC call, he said he would absolutely commit to debating Vice President Harris and that he'd be willing to do more than one debate. He says that he believes she'll be easier to beat than Joe Biden because he was slightly more mainstream, but not much. Mark, there's also just, in terms of the polling, the numbers are moving. I wonder how much stock you put into the amount of money raised, more than $100 million. It's even more than that if you're taking in some reporting about major donors who have contributed to the campaign. Just so much money, a flood of money that has come in. And the campaign says 62% of the donors are first-time donors. And they're pointing to that as a sign of enthusiasm among voters, not just, these big money folks. Do you put a lot of weight there?
Well, I mean, obviously, both sides are raising a lot of money. It is a sign of early momentum and also some pent-up demand for Democrats to have something to put their money on. And again, that could speak to sort of a long momentum stretch for her because early shows of people putting their money where their mouth is very, encouraging for that. I'm a little bit, I'd be kind of interested to hear what the Democrats' response is to Donald Trump's, openness to multiple debates with Kamala Harris. I do think one thing she's going to probably try to do is be everywhere, try to be much more ubiquitous than Joe Biden certainly was. Because, look, her youth, her vigor, her presence is going to be a major asset and also contrast to what the ticket looked like a week ago. Wouldn't be surprised if, in fact, the debate, calendar or the debate discussion opens up again in some way. Either way, it's new, it's interesting, and it's a lot sort of more unknown, certainly, than what last week looks like.